Hi everyone! Welcome to the Neal's Yard Dairy subscription, which will deliver 3 different artisan cheeses from around the British Isles to your door every month. First of all, Happy New Year! Welcome to 2022. I hope you all had wonderful holidays. I'm excited to start off the new year with a great cheese selection here, which features, here we come, Applebee's Cheshire here in the front, Spark and Hoe Red Leicester, Risley, a sheep's milk cheese, and then a lucky dip for this month. So this could be any cheese from our selection. I happen to have Brunswick Blue. And a very orange selection we have here of the 3 cheeses in the back. Don't think that was intentional. Great, so our first cheese this month is going to be Applebee's Cheshire, which is a really kind of special cheese for us. We all love this cheese here at Neal's Yard Dairy. One of our kind of longest standing relationships here. A raw cow's milk cheese from Shropshire. And it is actually the last raw milk, cloth-bound, kind of traditionally made farmhouse Cheshire being made in Britain today, which is quite exciting. The Appleby family have been making cheese on their farm since the 1950s, so it's quite a long time. And their longtime cheesemaker actually retired fairly recently. And so Paul Appleby has begun making the cheese himself. And there's been some kind of exciting changes in the cheese make from that. It's typically a really beautiful kind of mineral, very kind of crumbly and kind of fresh, very kind of succulent cheese. One that's a great one to kind of have on a cheese board, be able to kind of nibble away at over, a couple of hours with a beer or a cider. A very kind of gentle, really kind of easy eating cheese. And Paul, in his kind of changes to the cheese make so far, has made it a big one in that typically the cheese curd is cut using these big kind of harp instruments that cut the cheese into very small pieces that help strain the whey out. And he started to do this process by hand again, and so using these long traditional knives to cut the curd into these small pieces. And it does change the texture a bit, so it's going to be a little more, it's got a great kind of like bigger crumble to it, and it has a real kind of meaty texture. And I find it just be a bit more kind of savory in flavor, and that could just be my mind. But it's really nice at the moment, so I'm excited to kind of see what you think about it, especially if you've had this cheese before in the past. You'll see as well that this is the first of our orange cheeses for January. And the coloring from that is from a cheese, a food coloring called annatto, which is just, it's from a seed pod that's originally from South America. But it's a food coloring that's been used to color food for hundreds of years. So it's really kind of traditional food coloring there. No real flavor to speak of in quantities as small as what is used in cheese, but just makes it really kind of visually appealing. Cheshire is great, as I was saying, with beer or with cider, maybe, some lighter white wines, really kind of simple pairings. It's a great cheese to kind of just eat as a lunchtime, staple. So do feel free to experiment. Melt it into a toasty, mix it with cheddar. It's a very versatile cheese. Great. Second up is going to be another kind of British territorial cheese, which is Spark and Hoe Red Leicester, the mature version here. And again, territorial cheeses like Cheshire or like Red Leicester or Lancashire or Caerphilly, etc. These are all cheeses that are really kind of named after the areas of the country that they originated from. This one's actually made in Warwickshire, so it's not in Leicestershire itself. And the cheesemakers, David and Joe Clark, were originally just, farmers. They inherited a herd of Holstein Friesian cows, and they were just looking to add value to their milk, which is the way that many cheesemakers get started in the cheesemaking game. And what they wanted to do is really kind of bring back the traditional Red Leicester recipe that at the point that they were making this cheese, or kind of developing this cheese in 2005 or 6, around that time, traditional kind of farmhouse, raw milk, cloth-bound Red Leicester had been kind of extinct for about 50 years at that point. And so to kind of remake this recipe, they went out and looked for old recipe books and spoke to locals who remembered the cheese from back in the day, and were able to develop a recipe that they hoped was close enough to the traditional Red Leicester recipe. And like Cheshire, they also use annatto in their coloring, but it's a much kind of deeper, very kind of rich orange coloring. I love the color of this cheese. And the one you have at the moment in this selection is actually a slightly more mature version than their traditional Red Leicester. So usually Red Leicester is a fairly young cheese for a hard cheese. It's kind of sold between 3 to 6 months, the one that we sell from them. But this one we've taken on to about 12 months old, so it's about a year old. And it changes the flavor and the kind of texture quite a bit because it's going to be a bit more crystalline in texture. It's going to be a lot more kind of like saltier and a bit savory than you would find in a younger red Leicester, which is a bit more gentle and quite nutty. And it's just had a bit more time to develop these flavors in the maturation rooms. So I'm intrigued to see what you guys think from the difference there. And because it's a bit of a stronger flavor, it can kind of stand up to a bit more full-bodied, beverage pairing. So break out the kind of big reds or go for a dark ale. It can kind of match up to a bit more strength and kind of flavor in drinking and also with the cheese. So it's a nice one to kind of go for the big ones. Great, and on to our last orange cheese. This is Risley here. So this is a sheep's milk cheese from Berkshire, made by Anne Wigmore. And the orange color on this cheese does not come from annatto. It comes from a process called washing the cheese, which is where you get the term wash drying cheese, which is what Risley is. And what that means is the cheese that during maturation has been quite literally washed or rubbed or dabbed with water or with a very kind of light brine solution, which allows a kind of different set of bacteria to develop on the cheese and kind of discourage mold growth. And so you get these kind of much more kind of bigger, kind of savory flavors. I think Risley has quite like a bacony kind of vibe to it sometimes. Other kind of colleagues think it's more like pickle brine. But it develops a much different kind of flavor profile from its original cheese, which actually started life as Wigmore, which is another cheese that we sell from Anne Wigmore, as you would imagine. And Risley, in that sense, is a really interesting cheese to understand the difference that maturation technique can make to a cheese. So Wigmore, as the original cheese, is a mold-ripened cheese, so it has a rind quite like a brie, kind of white and quite earthy and kind of mushroomy. And Risley, in taking that very young Wigmore and not allowing a mold rind to develop, instead kind of washing the rind, just develops an entirely different cheese, which is endlessly fascinating, I think, for myself and probably many people who love cheese. And it develops a kind of lovely kind of pink, sticky rind that you get from a washed rind. It's really, really lovely. It can tend to be a bit of a more difficult type of cheese to pair with beverages, washed rinds in general, because they can be quite full flavored, can be kind of funky. But Risley is a very kind of gentle one, and I think it's really, really nice with a slightly more kind of full-bodied white, like a Chardonnay. I might not go for a red because the tannins might kind of compete with that a bit, but choose the wine that you love and it'll be the perfect pairing, I guarantee it. And that is Risley, a really, really nice one. It's one of my absolute favorite soft cheeses we have, so I hope you guys really enjoy that. Great, so those are our three kind of main cheeses there, and then I'll end here on the Lucky Dip, which you'll see is a much kind of smaller portion than the three other cheeses you have in your selection. And Lucky Dips for us are really a way of kind of utilizing smaller pieces of cheese that we're kind of left with when we are cutting to order for our online customers. So if you've bought from us before as an online order, you'll notice that we tend to work to minimum weights. So you might buy, a piece of cheddar that is a minimum weight of 250 grams. And so because we, cut all of our pieces by hand to order, sometimes we're left with smaller pieces that don't quite meet that weight requirements. And so these usually kind of get sent off to our shops to be sold on the shop floor because they're perfectly fine, they're delicious, they're just a bit smaller pieces than we would typically sell. But we've recently started to kind of make these available online as well because they really are a fantastic way to kind of just try a new cheese that you might be a bit unsure of to actually purchase a larger piece of, right away. So your Lucky Dip in this selection could be anything from our range. It could be a soft cheese like Baron Bygod, or it could be a blue, or it could be a cheddar. It could be really anything with a kind of minimum weight of at least 100 grams. So just a small little sliver of a new cheese. My Lucky Dip in this selection was Brunswick Blue, this one here, which is a great kind of, example of this way of just trying a new cheese. Because this one is another kind of cheese we have, which is a great example of how maturation can kind of change a cheese profile. So Brunswick Blue starts off life as Beanley Blue, which is a kind of Roquefort inspired cheese, kind of really like bright whites. There's no rind on it because it kind of matures in plastic, very kind of sweet and boozy, and it's beautiful. But what we do for Brunswick Blue is we receive kind of young Beanley Blues and we unwrap them and we allow them to develop a rind as they kind of mature on in our hard cheese maturation rooms. And it's fascinating because it develops a kind of more salty and kind of earthy and much more kind of mushroomy flavor that you don't really get in a Beanley Blue. So it's just that different maturation technique which completely just changes the cheese. But that's my lucky dip. So yours could be anything at all. So it's a great way to kind of just try a new one, but there you are. Great, and so that is your selection for January, first one of the year. So again, we've got Cheshire here on the front, Mature Sparkling Her Red Leicester, Risley, our sheep's milk cheese, and Brunswick Blue to end it off, your lucky dip. I hope you enjoy, and again, if you have any questions at all, please do get in touch over on our website, give us a call, drop us a line, and I hope you enjoy the cheese, and I will see you in February. Bye!